Hello and welcome to our live event today with Lori and David from Nacho Kids, where we're going to talk about blending family basics, which is funny. It's a funny title because is it ever basic, really? No,
It's basically
no.
messed up.
It's basically impossible, really, right? It feels a little bit impossible. But anyway, Nacho Kids, tell the audience about Nacho Kids and what you all have been up to.
Go ahead, David.
What have we been up to? A little bit of everything. So we're always looking for ways we can better help blended families and how we can be more visible to blended families. We don't want to be the best kept secret on the internet, right? So we're revamping things that we're doing for 2025 within the Nacho Kids Academy. We're also starting to do some live things, live events, and live meetups. So the meetups are kind of an informal, hey, we just meet up at a restaurant for people that are in a particular area. We've done 2 so far throughout the country.
Yes.
Oh, how fun.
Yep. So
Yeah.
a little bit of everything.
I'm sad that you were here in Phoenix and I didn't get to see you.
I know. I'm so sorry. I didn't think about it till we got back. And the whole time we were there, I'm thinking, I know somebody else from
Don't
here.
I know somebody?
Yeah. Next time.
Yeah, of live meetups because, we're pretty isolated and it feels pretty lonely and it feels pretty impossible to blend families. And it almost feels impossible both for the biological parent and for the step parent.
Yeah, it's funny. The last one we did, a couple of people that were there were like, it's so nice to meet somebody else that's local who has a lot of the same issues I have. So even though they can meet online, it's still people just don't meet in person.
Yeah.
And there's a lot to say about having a community of people that you can lean on that get it too, because there's plenty of people out there to give you their opinion.
Totally.
That's not necessarily a positive thing.
I agree with you. So I am a stepmom and blending families, changes, right? So my 3 stepkids just moved in with us full time. So the whole blended family that existed before is a different blended family that exists today. And I was reading some of the posts on the Modern Divorce Support Group and the people who were giving feedback. And I was like, you guys are so harsh. Like, do you have any idea how hard and how complicated this is?
Yeah. Mean people are mean people.
Well,
They
not-
just,
Well,
I
and
think
hurt
they
people
don't
hurt
get
people.
it. Like, they
Yeah.
just don't get it. Like, the
Yeah.
level of complexity. Like, you can't just treat all the kids the same.
No, you
What-
can't.
not only that, but when you don't have to deal with the consequences of that decision, it's easy to tell somebody what to do.
You're right. You're right. Yeah. And so the question that I'm thinking about right now that came up over Christmas was the stepmom was writing in and she was just heartbroken because she had read on her son's cell phone that he had had a bad Christmas. And he had had a bad Christmas because his stepsister kept opening his presents. And she said that, yes, she and her husband were aware of it, and the husband had corrected the stepdaughter a few times, but then the husband was distracted and taking care of the 2-year-old, and apparently the stepdaughter just kept doing it. And the stepmom was writing in because she felt really, really awful about how her son felt and how she handled her stepdaughter. And people were just like, how could you? How could you let this happen? This is completely on you and your husband. And so what would you suggest in that type of situation?
Why it's happening or after it's over and done?
Well, I mean, both. Okay, so how should she have handled it in the moment? Obviously, what could they have done better? But also, let's acknowledge that none of us are going to get this right. And this is going to happen, right? The children who are not biological children, the same way biological siblings are going to offend each other, step siblings are going to have mishaps. And like, how are we supposed to be handling that?
I think it's no different than if the kids were fighting over something. So basically, you stop the interaction with the kid and the present at the time. And you don't have to be ugly. You don't have to be a parent. You can just say, no, little Susie, these are little Johnny's presents and you can open yours, but not his. And then if dad doesn't step in, then you can be like, Dad, I need your help. It's okay to ask for help. The thing is, you don't want to bash the kid while you're doing this whole nacho thing. You don't want to go, I need you to come get your bratty youngin' to quit opening my kids' presents.
Well, right. Or how does this person, you want to be able to correct your stepchildren if they're, doing something that's really bothering you or bothering your children, but you want to do it in a way that's friendly and non-offensive. And,
And I don't even look at it as correcting them
okay.
as much as I look at it as the protection of my child
Yeah.
in that scenario.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So then you just put yourself in a place of, hey, little Susie, yeah. So mom let dad correct and it didn't go smoothly. And then the parents missed it. Okay. They could have done better in the moment. But afterwards, what should they do now to repair this kind of ugly situation?
Well, they're not going to be able to fix it. So from that standpoint, you've got to let it go. You're not going to be able to recreate Christmas for little Johnny. And so instead, you prepare for the next time that there's presents. For instance, a birthday coming up. It's little Susie's birthday. You're not going to let little Johnny open her presents out of retaliation because she opened his Christmas presents. And same for his birthday. You're not going to let her open his presents then. It needs to be addressed. And it doesn't have to be addressed in a your kid's bad way. It's just this situation presented itself, and this is what we can do to prevent it in the future.
Yeah.
And if you dealing with it now and the consequences of what's going to happen, for instance, okay, Dad, I'll say something to you, but if you don't do something, this is what's going to happen. That way he knows ahead of time, look, you don't step in, then this is what's going to happen. Not saying you're going to do anything bad to the kid, but you're going to step in and it's going to be more aggressive.
Yeah. So they get on the same page. They say, next time, here's our plan. And by the way, Dad, if I see stepdaughter do this again, and either you don't see it or you don't correct it, I'm going to ask her to leave the room until we're done opening presents. Something like that.
Right. Exactly.
Got it. And then
you can always say, do you have a better suggestion? Because this is what I've come up with.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. What's our
Yeah.
plan?
Right.
Do you think it's a good idea to have like family meetings where these things are discussed and everybody puts their stuff on the table? What do you think about that?
No. We tried that. It turns into a complaint fest. And like, for instance, with us, it was my son and I that were being attacked by these 5 other people or 4 other people at the table. So it wasn't very, very productive. And if you want to make sure everybody has say, then you're asking them to say, what's going on? What are you not happy about? Instead of what are you happy about? And that was part of our problem, is we looked at it as what are our problems other than what are the good things that are coming from this.
Yeah.
It's like you handed like a boardroom meeting. Let's discuss the issues that we have, and it was
what's making you miserable.
Yeah, I'm not saying family meetings for step families are necessarily bad, but there's a way to handle them and a way not to, and we didn't do it right. And so, and we've talked to other families, and it's kind of, some people get it. Some people say it works, and other people say no, they had the same results that we had.
I will say it was important for my son and I to have kind of our meetings.
Yeah.
And David and his son to kind of have their meetings for us to kind of get a feel of how things were going, because they're going to act differently in front of each other also. Yeah.
No, we did do that. We did that constantly, where I'd say probably every night with my kids, I would like, how was your day and what was going on? And was there any issues that you saw? And we're talking about when we were in the throes of things.
Yeah.
It was what's the newest thing happening? So
what did we do to you today?
Yeah, well, that's probably exactly what I said.
Yeah. Yes.
And then, and there was a lot of coaching them on what we were doing, not specifics, but just, you realize how hard this is. We're trying to blend 2 families. I understand this is difficult on everybody. So there was a lot of, admitting that everybody's having a challenge here and giving everybody grace moving forward. This is not easy on anybody. So there was a lot of that coaching going on.
Yeah.
At least in my meetings with my kids.
Yeah.
Well, that's nice, right? To call it out, be like, this isn't going to be simple or perfect. We've had 2 family meetings. So these three teenagers moved into my house like three weeks ago. I shouldn't say my house. It's now our house. And
I need you back on the podcast.
Right? So now we have 6 kids here. Sometimes it's 4 kids. But that's a lot of kids, no matter when. And we've had 2 family meetings and on Sundays, and we really just talk logistics. Where do people have to be and when? Who needs rides? Who needs what gear? And then we came up with chores, which we've never done in our house, but now everybody has a chore. And traditionally, like my partner and I, we're terrible at this. We're terrible at enforcement. Kids blow us off. We're bad at consequences. So we did week 1, and then we checked in, and like 3 of the kids hadn't done chores. One of them had done them every day, like obvious stuff that's going to happen. So we appointed the one that did it every day. She's the manager. And she's going to be the boss, and she's going to tell us every Sunday, like, what happened, and then we'll figure out consequences on the backside.
Are you trying to get them to hate her?
No, they agreed. They thought she did a great job. They thought she did.
No. Really? The kids agreed that she should be the manager?
All the kids agreed that this person had done such a great job with her chore, which was unloading the dishwasher. She was exceptional at this. And so when they did their chore, they were just going to check in and let her know, and she was just going to keep track. So but we're only 2 weeks in, right? We're only 2 weeks in. This could blow up.
Whatever works.
Whatever
works.
We'll let you know, because we don't know what we're doing.
Yeah. I take the military approach, and like, if anybody's chores is not done, everybody's getting punished.
Oh, yeah.
Well, and we tried to rotate chores. That way one person wasn't always doing the dishes. We would even like draw numbers sometimes, and even showers with them, because you would have to draw numbers. Who was going to go first, second, third, and fourth?
Yeah. Well, before we got the tankless water heater, we would have to do some showers at night, some showers in the morning, because we'd run out of hot water.
Tankless water heater is so critical.
They are a necessity for blended families.
Plus 2 washing machines, 2 dishwashers. We have 2 dishwashers. Yes. That's also crucial, because one dinner fills up 2 dishwashers.
Yes, and you always have dirty dishes in the sink.
Always.
Yeah.
And that's what I tell people a lot of times, and it may seem harsh, but your OCD is your problem, right?
Right.
And I felt people get mad when I said that. But it is your issue to deal with. And I'll tell you, I had a lot of OCD tendencies, but they had to go out the window.
Yeah.
Because there was no way that I could live in a house with 6 other people and keep up with everything they did.
Yeah.
You would walk out of the room and dishes would appear in the sink, clothes in the laundry. It's like, where does this come from? You can't. You've got to figure out which is more important, my sanity or being with David.
Aww.
And that's what
I can answer that one.
Yeah.
Your sanity.
Well, you really had to change your expectations, because the household that you had with you and your child, the 2 of you, was not going to look the same.
No.
As with you and David and his 4 boys. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So how did you do that? How did you get over that and really like come to grips with the fact that your house was now going to be loud and messy and not run the way you wanted it to run?
I spent a lot of time on the front porch. I found one of the best things I did. David took us all to paint ceramics, and I call them granny ceramics, because usually older people paint the ceramics, And I found that I could paint ceramics and they could be running around me as long as they didn't bump me or the table. That was my peace. That was my place that I felt like me. I was okay with the chaos. Well, not okay, but
zone out.
I could zone out basically. And I couldn't read. I can't read with chaos. So that wasn't an option.
Right.
So you have to find something that helps you, whether it's going for a walk, whether it's going to the gym, calling a friend, want to sit on the back porch, calling a friend.
Noise canceling headphones.
No, yes.
Yeah, disassociate. You got to dissociate.
Yes.
Oh, I just saw a question that flashed up and then it went away.
Yep, I did too.
Okay. Here's a question we got from our viewers. What are some long-term strategies for maintaining harmony and mutual respect in our blended family? Every time I feel like things get okay, it then falls apart. And two of the kids don't get along and constantly are bumping heads.
Well, it probably has that yo-yo effect, because at times I'm assuming they may be trying to nacho, I'm guessing. But if they are, it's maybe because they're trying to re-engage too quickly.
Okay, tell me more.
You don't want to re-engage until you are ready and the kids are ready. So we see a lot of people that will quote, quote, nacho for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever it is, and things get better because they can instantly because you let the pressure off, right? And then the next thing you know, things have changed and they're like, what happened?
Yeah, it's just like that person said, every time things get better, they go right back. So
my first thought was, if they're nachoing, they're not continuing to nacho.
Yeah. The other thing, too, is things get better for who? You know, it doesn't necessarily mean because you don't feel it that it's better for everybody. It could be that the kids are just, they're ignoring it, but it's not better for them.
Right.
And they're not ready for it. So there's a lot more questions to be asked on that. But
Yeah.
there are long-term strategies. In fact, everything we teach has to do with long-term strategies. But it's like, I liken it to working out. Like if you want to stay in shape, you can't quit doing the things to stay in shape. And addressing your blended family is the same way. You can't stop focusing on the things you have to do in order to keep your family and your blend sane.
Yeah, we've been together 15 years.
Yep.
Yeah, 15 years. And we see instances now where we're more dealing with blended family stuff than we did really when the kids were here.
Really?
Because of the grandbabies.
Yeah.
Oh, tell me more. What does that look like?
The step grandbabies. I love them. I
Yeah.
love them. I do.
Yeah.
But the reality of it is, I'm not their blood. And one of his kids, it was funny. One day he said something. He was holding the little girl and I said, let me hold her. And he said, you're not blood. Because he does a lot. And I said, well, you're right, but she doesn't know any different. So give me that baby. And so then the next thing that we did, his wife came up to him and said, hey, let me hold the baby. He's like, you're not blood. So I was like, okay, well, I'm not taking offense to it. He's right. I'm not blood. But these kids will grow up and it will hit them at some point. Oh, David and what's her name were married at one point. They got divorced. Lori came in the picture. So that's how it all coordinates. It's difficult for them to figure out. We need a flow chart sometimes ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing too is some of the things that once they, you hear the whole thing, they turn 18, they move out or whatever. That's not always the case.
Right.
Now
nowadays.
Yeah. Now three of mine went to the military. The other one did actually move out. And so I will tell you that in our case, some instances, it was actually easier when they were here than when they now are moved out and starting their own family because you had more control.
Like you did.
You had the ability to at least somewhat guide their decision making. But now that they're in their mid-20s, you don't know what they're doing until they call you and tell you about some dumb thing they did.
Mm-hmm.
And then, having grandbabies now too, there was a time period in which I didn't have to deal with eggs at all. Like kids are above 18, they're doing their thing with mom. There's no transitioning happening anymore. Completely done with that. Like Sarah and I'm done.
Yeah.
Sour
Yeah.
What I can't even say it now.
And now it's like, oh, guess what? We get to go back and, have birthday parties where all that has to happen again. And now we have
2 days in a row.
Yeah. Now we have to have shared time with grandkids because are they going to go to the grandmother's house or granddad's house? And some of it kind of starts over again.
Because you can't expect your stepkids or his kids to have separate parties for the family.
Oh, right. So does that mean everybody goes?
Well, that's kind of what seems to be happening here lately.
Yeah.
How's that going?
It was interesting. It was kind of a last minute change up. We were going to have it here. She wanted to be included because some previous plans had fallen through. So they moved it to David's mom's house, 2 houses down. It was awkward. It was awkward.
Sure.
It wasn't like really uncomfortable, just awkward.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that because you guys didn't do a lot of things? Like, did you all find yourselves at the same soccer games and the same baseball? Like, have you done a lot of blended family events where everybody showed up? And is it different now with the grandbaby?
Oh.
Yes and yes.
Yeah. I mean, we did a lot of stuff. My kids were in sports. And so, we went to games and that was fun. But I've never
sat with her or.
Yeah, there was not a good relationship there just because of a lot of high conflict by moms. And so there's just not a relationship there anymore. So when we have these events now, because you got to remember there's 6 years, probably 6 years since we've had to be around them at all. So there's been like 6 years of nothing. And now all of a sudden it's like
hanging out in Papa's garage together.
Yeah. It's like, hey, so there's just not, it's almost, for me, it's almost like it's a stranger there that you don't, it's like, I don't really know who you are. I just remember that I don't like you.
Oh yeah. I remember why we divorced.
Yeah.
Okay. So I want to get back to this person's question. What is the long-term strategy? You said that people will nacho and then stop. Can you explain that?
They try to jump back in too quickly with the relationship. Not that they necessarily try to jump back into parenting them on day 8, but instead they're trying to push that relationship, being more involved with the kid. They're not allowing time to heal. Most of the time when people nacho, it's not at the beginning of the relationship. It is when things fall to crap.
Right.
If you can do it from the beginning, good, great.
Yeah.
But it's when things fall to crap that they start doing this stuff, and they'll do it for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever, and they see improvement. They're like, oh, great, the stepkid's not cussing me out anymore. Then they try to re-engage with little Susie, and she's flipping them off and everything else because it was too soon.
Okay.
And you not only have to look at yourself, but also the child. It's best to let the stepkid lead that relationship.
Yeah.
Okay, do you have any tips for that? Like, how do we as step parents let our stepchildren like tell us what they want for a relationship? They're not going to come out and say it explicitly. So how do we know?
I think by their actions.
Yeah, you look at things like with my kids, when she first started kind of just stepping back away from things, they were fine with it. And then
They loved it.
Yeah, and then there came a time where it's like, hey, where's Lori? Start asking questions. And then they would come in a little later and then they would address her like, hey, Lori, check out this new thing I got. And that you could tell they're starting to want to have some type of engagement. And at that point, you don't want to go, oh, yay, and just dive right back in.
I know, right? Love you, little
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's about time. And yeah, so you let them continue to lead. You don't push it. You just let them continue to lead that until it gets to wherever it's going to be, because it's different for every kid and for every adult. There's some kids, even in our 4, there's 4 different levels of engagement there. And they all look different.
Yes, I nacho all of them differently.
I'm hearing like general cat rules. You know how with cats, you got to kind of be aloof and not be too eager.
Yeah.
You know, cats, like general, like treat your stepchildren like cats. Be careful. Let it be on their terms.
Right.
I'm going to think about that. Okay. Here's the next question. What are the do's and don'ts for disciplining stepchildren in a blended family?
You do not.
Period.
Yeah, just don't.
Just don't.
Well, we know that somebody's saying, well, wait a minute, I'm with them all the time. I'm a stay-at-home stepmom.
Yeah.
So how do I discipline them? Well, that's when you need to have house rules and consequences. Agreed upon house rules and consequences. So that means you make a list, your partner makes a list, you take the ones that are in common. Hey, there's your house rules, right? The ones that you don't have in common, you can discuss those, but then you got to think about the consequences. Every chance that something happens, you need to leave it up to the bio parent to handle if they can. That doesn't mean let little Susie run around with a butcher knife.
Right.
That means you take the butcher knife from little Susie and say, we don't run with butcher knives. And then when you talk to dad, you say, you might want to talk to little Susie about knife safety. Something like that. Because they can still parent and not have to physically be there a lot of times with these kids. Of course, ages matter, things like that. And again, if your stepkid's fighting with another kid, stepkid, your own kid, you can break it up, say, we don't talk to each other like that.
Yeah.
So go to your room, and if they don't,
direction, right? Counseling, coaching. This is not like you can't say anything to your stepkid.
Right. Well, you know, a friend of mine asked me that one time because I was walking her through the method, and she's like, you mean I can't say anything? I said, no, you can't. Because she's got a tone to her that no matter how she says it, it sounds like she's just mad.
Yeah. The other thing to realize, too, is that you're never really doing the same thing forever. So even though we're sitting here saying, don't say anything to them, don't discipline them, that doesn't necessarily mean that same type of relationship is going to always be there. There are people that get far enough along, depends on the kids' ages and all kind of other factors, that they can start stepping in and doing some things, but you have to understand where you're at and where the kid's at and what you can do and not do. If you want a peaceful blend, that's just the only way we found for that to really work.
And the goal of nachoing is to build healthy relationships with everybody in the blend, not boot the stepkid out, not try to figure out how to get them to go live back with the other parent. None of that. It's figuring out what works for you. And so, for instance, in the beginning, I would text David what the kids were doing wrong. This is the beginning of Nacho. Well, I'm not saying it, but I'm texting him. I'm telling him. Well, after a while, he's like, for the love of God, texting me.
Yeah.
So then I had to say, okay, wait a minute. If I'm watching the kids and David's gone for an hour somewhere, and something happens, I'm going to make a list. So I would make a list. And then 5 minutes before he would get home, I would look at that list and say, if I was a babysitter,
Yeah.
would I tell David these things? And the answer was no, except for maybe one of them. And then I would tell him, not right when he walked in the door. I would just tell him, say, we need to talk about something that happened today. Because it's easy, especially when there's so many stepkids like you're experiencing. You can complain about them 24/7. Easy.
Yeah.
Even if they're good kids, because I'm telling you.
They're good kids.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Yeah,
But there's still going to be issues. They're kids, right?
Yeah. And
So-
just remember, when you're complaining about the stepkids, oftentimes what that other parent is hearing, the bio parent, they're hearing, you suck at being a parent.
Right.
And you're a terrible dad, or you're a terrible
Totally.
mom, and you're a terrible discipline, and you can't do that. It's all negative. And so you're thinking, all I said was the kid didn't put a dish in the sink. But that's not what they hear.
Right.
So
How do you deal with parents who have different rules? Let's say, one parent is you must eat vegetables, you have cell phone limits, you have to go to bed on time. And one parent is like, it's all good.
Well, here's the fun part. One parent, one bio parent, or a step parent and a bio parent?
Well, in a blended family with, each person has kids.
Right.
And then you would end up having
So like you and your husband.
Yeah, so we would have different rules. Let's say
Right.
there's different rules for each set of kids. How do you handle that?
No different than if it was a child next door. I had different rules for Jackson than David had for his kids.
Mm-hmm.
And it was simply, I'm not their mom. David chooses how to raise his kids.
Got it.
I choose how to raise you. Well, it's not fair. Well, little Johnny down the road gets to smoke. Do you think you should smoke too?
Sure.
And no, it's not fair. Life's not fair. And it's not favoritism. That's the thing. There's a difference in showing blatant favoritism and these are the rules. I am not your father.
Yeah.
I am your mother. And even with Jackson, he's like, man, David's going to have a heck of a time when them kids get older.
Okay, so why couldn't the two of you just come to rules then that you just both agreed on that said these would be our house rules?
Because they wouldn't be enforced.
yeah, now there were rules and still are rules that we did agree on. And that's what she was talking about earlier, is you sit down and you both make that list and you see where did they match?
Right.
Because if Lori says kids shouldn't jump on the beds, and I'm like, dude, the beds are trampolines. What are you talking about?
Truth.
Then it just means that she and I don't see eye to eye on that. It doesn't matter to me. Like for me, here's a real one for us. Like I didn't care the kids running around and screamed.
Sure.
I'm like, the house is alive. It's awesome.
Yeah.
And so she's like, I come from a house where it's me and my one kid, and it was like a
Right.
library.
Well, even
Like,
before that, it was me and my two sisters, and you sat properly on the furniture. And
yeah. No, not
Different
my house.
cultures. Yeah.
Not, we try to jump from arm of the couch to the other arm of the couch. And if you can do it in one leap,
So if he would play monster with the kids, which is something they enjoy doing, that they would scream, I would just go sit outside.
Okay.
But bedtimes, for instance,
Yeah.
Jackson had an earlier bedtime. He was younger. Even if he would have been a bio kid or an hours kid, I think we would have done the same thing.
Mhm.
And I know it's not fair, and it doesn't seem like, oh, well, I can enforce the same thing that he's not doing, because then my kid's like, well, you're mean to me. Well, are you going to lower your parenting standards to meet your partners if you think his are lower or theirs are lower?
That is a question, right? That people probably have to be asking themselves. Is this something I want to compromise on if I think that this is the way to go? But at the
Right.
same time, if you make your kid eat their vegetables and they get to watch their step siblings eat dessert without eating vegetables, I could see how this would be a problem.
Mm-hmm. And usually the vegetable person gives in. Screw it. Eat ice cream. Because it's just easier.
Yeah.
But you have to figure out what matters to you.
Yeah.
And don't force the stepkids to eat those vegetables. Offer them at the table.
Mhm.
But it's not your place to figure out their dietary needs.
Yeah.
Or push yours on them.
Yeah. And we've seen a lot of relationships literally fall apart over food.
Broccoli.
Yeah.
Vegetables and dessert.
Yeah.
I have to imagine that comes up everywhere. Yeah. So one of my stepchildren is an incredibly picky eater, but also one of my biological children is a very, very picky eater. So I've already
Yeah.
they'll eat, and that's just not a battle. But if I didn't have a biological child that was an incredibly picky eater, I can imagine that having a new stepchild move in would be very offensive, and I would take that personally. And
Yes.
I can imagine that would cause a lot of fights. which is just awful.
Right. Yep. Taking things personally is a really good thing that step parents do.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
But even if
Yeah.
little Johnny writes a note that says, I hate you, Lori, well, how am I not going to take that personal? It says Lori. It's what I represent.
Okay. All right. You still don't take it personally. You're like, they're
No.
just going through
No.
something. Kids are always in a phase.
No, because it's what I represent. It represents that their dad and their mom are never getting back together. I represent somebody else that they have to listen to.
Right.
I represent that, before Lori came, we could jump on the couch, but not anymore. Piece of advice, anybody listening, before you get in a blend, any changes that you want to make to these house rules, if you let your kids jump on the couch and your partner says they don't want that to happen and you agree, stop it before you start blending the home.
Idea. That's a really good idea. Yeah. But not everybody has noticed. Sometimes they just show up.
Yeah.
No, it's
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
So, all right, this advice is contrary to a lot of blended family advice, which is parents get on the same page, figure out your house rules formally. That is the majority of the advice. And I just want to call that out because your advice is very different.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
Your audio changed just so it switched back to a different microphone, I think. But while you figure that out, we'll just talk about how our advice is very different. We've taken a lot of heat for that.
Mhm.
If you would have told us in the beginning of our relationship that we should do this, we would tell you you were crazy. It was the complete opposite of what we had read, researched, talked to people about, and all that stuff. But it worked amazingly.
Mm-hmm.
Amazingly. I can't talk again. But if you would have seen where we were then and where we are now, it is 100% night and day. It's crazy to think that we were in such a bad spot. But then I see pictures where I'm like a skeleton from all the stress and just sick all the time. And we played good for the pictures, but you can tell just there was no light in anybody's eyes at that point in time.
Yeah. It's really just a matter of figuring out what works for your blend.
Not sure it doesn't work for everybody.
Yes, there is no silver bullet. There is no one way to do blended families.
But you cannot say that you are nachoing when you're parenting somebody else's kid.
Right.
That's not nachoing.
Yep.
But I'm nachoing my way. No, you're not nachoing.
Well, Lori and David, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate you as always. And we will get together again soon.
Yes.
All right.
Thanks. Good to see you. Bye.
Bye.